Hi, my name is Paul, and I'm a member with Restored Church. If you're new, we want to welcome you and thank you for tuning in. We believe that the church is not an event, but a family that you belong to, so we'd love the opportunity to connect with you. If you want to learn more about our church, or if we can help you in any way, please visit our website, restoredtemecula.church, and click on Contact. We also have a mobile app with resources, including our Sunday messages, information about upcoming events, and other ways to connect. You can download our app on Apple or Android app stores. With all that said, we hope you enjoy the message.
So this morning, special morning for us. The one and only Andy Rodgers is with us. Now listen, here's something that you need to know about Andy. This church as you know it, for all intents and purposes, most likely would not exist without Andy. Now that sounds intense. I'm not trying to elevate Andy above Jesus by any means. However, God in a remarkable way has used Andy to initiate, to pioneer, to lead, to develop. So we're part of a family of churches. Most, if not all of you know this. But the very first Restored Church that was ever planted was planted by Andy and his wife Jackie and a small team of people for whom myself and Herrick and Heather and Ebony and a handful of us that are in the room were a part of. And so I want to honor him because God's done something really, really beautiful through Andy and his gifts and his leadership. Now I want to read you something out of Ephesians chapter 4. I'm going to read out the New Living Translation because I want to mix things up. It says this. This is the Apostle Paul writing to Ephesian Christians. And he says, now these are the gifts. These are the gifts that Christ gave to the church. And he starts listing them. He says, the apostles, a gift to the church. The prophets, a gift to the church. The evangelists, a gift to the church. The pastors, a gift to the church. And the teachers, a gift to the church. Listen to this. Their responsibility, so these gifts are actually people. Do you catch that? Their responsibility is to equip God's people to do his work and build up the church, the body of Christ. This will continue, so it's not going to stop, until we all come to such unity in our faith and knowledge of God's Son that we will be mature in the Lord, measuring up to the full and complete standard of Christ. So check this out. So God has an agenda with you, with me, with our church. And his agenda is to make us as much like Jesus as humanly possible. And one of the ways that he carries out that agenda is through specific people who are gifted by God in specific ways. And Andy's one of these people. I'm convinced that there's an apostolic gifting on his life, an apostolic call on his life. When I say apostolic, I don't mean that he's like going to write, Bible 2.0. What I mean by that is someone who pioneers gospel ministry initiatives, someone who guards doctrine, someone who's sent in beautiful and meaningful and important ways. And so Andy has a word for us this morning that I'm really excited for all of us to hear. Without further ado, will you bless him with your hands? Will you make some noise for him and welcome him? Andy Rodgers.
I'd love to pray, and then we'll get started. Father, thank you for this morning. Thank you that you see us, that you know us. You know our feelings, our fears. You know what makes us anxious. You know what makes us angry. You know what makes us really confused. You know what feels really big to us right now. You know our story, you know our past, you know our future. And I pray that we'd increasingly learn to present all of ourselves to you. And that in doing that there would be freedom, that wouldn't feel scary, but increasingly that would feel safe and feel free. And I pray that all of us could, what Tom described, that we'd grow up into maturity, that we'd increasingly look like the person of Jesus, with the most relationally healthy person who ever lived, the most emotionally healthy person who ever lived, the most spiritually healthy person who ever lived, the most mentally healthy person who ever lived. And that like him, we could live lives of love and grace. I pray the fruit of the Holy Spirit would grow through today's time together, that I would put some things in front of people, but ultimately, God, that you would cause the growth. Jesus, he said, apart from me, you can do nothing. And I think a lot of us in this room think, well, we could probably do some stuff. And even myself as a preacher who at times can have a real pride to think, I got some good stuff to say. The reality is that in and of myself, I may be able to impress people with information. I may be able to get people to laugh. I may be able to get people to cry. But at the end of the day, that's not necessarily spiritual fruit. And so, Lord, would you bring about fruits through the power of your Spirit? And I pray that you would speak through me and in spite of me. Pray to be open-handed this morning with what's shared. And I pray for those of us who are here that we'd be open-handed as well to receive what it is you want us to receive. We'd be able to set aside what is not for us, but embrace what is for us. And then clarity from your Spirit to know what next steps to take as we seek to become like Jesus. In his name we pray. Amen. Well, today we're going to start this message a little bit differently than I normally do. And this morning we're going to start with a picture. I have a picture here, should be coming up, of a man named Hiro Onoda. And Hiro Onoda, this picture was taken, you can tell it's black and white, he's got a military uniform. This was taken during World War II. Onoda was a young intelligence officer in the Imperial Japanese Army during World War II. Now I want to say as I talk about this guy and what he did, I'm not trying to glamorize him or villainize him. He is connected to war, and with war comes atrocity, every single war that's ever happened. But I do want to use his life as an illustration of a pretty key idea that we're talking about this morning. So Hiro was deployed alongside a team to a place called Lubang Island in the Philippines in 1944 with a specific mission. And it was to disrupt enemy operations and gather intelligence. The enemy was the Allied forces, primarily the United States of America, who were in the Philippine Islands at the time. And he was highly trained in surveillance and counterintelligence, and really in propaganda, which comes in later. And there was this big fear that eventually American warships would show up to the island, they would invade the island, they would retake it. And he and his men, eventually that did happen, and he and his men were beat over and over and over again in gunfights and skirmishes by Americans who forced Onoda's guys, these Japanese soldiers, to retreat up into the mountains, kind of if they wanted to stay alive. Many of his men were killed or captured, but not Onoda and his closest comrades. There were 4 of them. And for a few months, this continued. He and his men could hear from the mountains American guns going off as they decimated what was left of the Japanese troops on the island. But one day, the gunfire stopped. It was silent. And that day turned into a week. And that week turned into several weeks. And Onoda and his men started to wonder, maybe the American kind of cleanup squads had finished their job. Maybe we're safe now. Onoda thought that, again, counterintelligence propaganda, he thought maybe they stopped firing to trick Onoda and his men to come out of the mountains, trick them into believing they were safe, to then come down and kind of get them. Kind of like when a parent leaves the house and then comes back to see what the kids are doing, that kind of thing, obviously on steroids. So he's like, no way we're going out there. We're going to stay in the mountains. There's not going to be any obvious sign until there's not any obvious signs of American forces. And then one day in 1945, waiting for months, they hear a sound overhead. It's a diesel roar. An American plane flies by. And Onoda knew the American military was finally going to unleash something on them to finish the job. And he held his breath and he waited. And sure enough, he heard a door open and he's waiting for this kind of payload. And instead of an explosion, what he hears is a soft ruffling of papers. It's kind of like he's looking up and there's paper. It's like a team won the World Series, whatever, like paper. It almost looks like confetti. There's these pieces of paper. There's hundreds of pieces of paper. And Onada grabbed one of the pieces, and it said, "The war has ended on August 15th. Come down from the mountains." And it was from the Japanese emperor. Now, Onada was immediately suspicious and anxious because he had been trained on the tactics of misinformation. He was taught that when you can't break an enemy with bullets or bombs, you break them with thoughts or ideas. You infect their minds with doubt, contradictions, lies, or even false hope. Just hope in the wrong things. And Onada and his men read the notes together, and they wondered if they were real. Again, American planes dropped them. On top of that, the grammar was awkward, almost like an American who had recently picked up Japanese as a second language had translated them, which was the case. This is all wrong, Onada thought. The leaflets were clearly a trick, and he didn't want to be captured by the Americans who he thought would torture and kill him if he came out of the mountains. Now here's the thing, hundreds of miles away, a typist had made a mistake on this leaflet, but it was an honest mistake. But it was a mistake that threw Onada off enough to make a life-changing decision. And here's why the decision was life-changing. The war actually had ended. Japan had surrendered. But you see, Onada had been taught, unless your commanding officer tells you you're discharged, you are not discharged. And so for years, Onada lives in the mountains on this island. A couple more of his friends die, and he ends up being all by himself. And he adheres to military discipline. He meticulously maintains his uniform. He regularly cleans his rifle. And he continued his surveillance on the island, completely unaware that the world had moved on from the war. He would even actually kill some people on the island, Philippine police officers that he thought were soldiers. And so 30 years later, in 1974, there's a man named Norio Suzuki. Now, Norio was a 20-something Japanese adventurer tourist, which, I mean, that's kind of a millennial, right? Like, I know he's from the 70s. Like, I'm an adventure tourist, like and subscribe. Before the trip, Norio had a fancy job in Tokyo, but he didn't find his work fulfilling, which, again, most millennial thing you've ever heard in your life. And he decided, you ever ask your grandparents, was your work fulfilling? So he decided he wanted to travel, again, born in the 50s, but real millennial energy. And he went on this mythical quest of a trip that would definitely have a YouTube channel if it were today. And he quit his job and he sold everything he had, and he set out to find three things: a panda in the wild of China, the abominable snowman in Nepal, and Lieutenant Hiro Onada, one of the only unaccounted for men that was thought to be alive back in Japan. And Norio was pretty committed to this trip. As a matter of fact, tragically, he would die in Nepal trying to find the abominable snowman. Like, he was into this trip. But before that happened, he goes into the jungles and he's hiking and looking, and eventually comes across Onada. And he goes, "Hey, did you know that the war is over?" And he didn't believe it. He said, "Okay." And so Norio actually contacts the Japanese government and goes, "Hey, he's down to come out if, he knows that the war is over." And so Onada seemed to really enjoy talking to the guy. I hadn't talked to someone in Japanese in a long time. Felt very familiar, felt safe, but he still was like, "I don't know, man." And so Suzuki couldn't convince Onada that the war was over, so he asked for help from the Japanese government, which dispatched Onada's former commanding officer, Major Yoshimi Taniguchi, to personally relieve him of his duty. Major Taniguchi was no longer a major. As a matter of fact, he wasn't in the military at all anymore. He had opened a grocery store and was enjoying his life for decades since getting out of the military. But on March 9th, 1974, Taniguchi headed back to Lubang in his major uniform 30 years after being there originally. And he meets with Onada and he presents him with a direct order from the Japanese government, officially instructing him to lay down his arms and cease fighting. We got a picture of that day, and with tears in his eyes, Onada finally accepted that the war had ended. And he laid down his rifle, bringing his incredible solitary war to a close. Now catch this. He had been fighting a war for 30 years that was no longer happening. And 20 of those, he was by himself. Again, his surrender captured global attention. It marks kind of the end of this wild time in history. But here's the thing I want you to take from today. You might be like, Andy, what does this have to do with my life? Are you trying to tell a sad story to get us warmed up? What's going on here? Trying to get us to cry? I'm not trying to get you to cry, but what I do want to say is that what you believe is true impacts how you live. In other words, your thoughts impact your life situation. A lot of us, we want to change our life situation, but we don't want to deal with our thoughts. Or we want to deal with our emotions, kind of therapeutic kind of world we live in now. It's like everything's just, man, just fix your emotions. Or man, self-care. Like we just got to like, and again, I'm not anti-therapy. I'm not anti-self-care. But like a big part of self-care isn't just doing something fun, like a behavior, like going to a spa. Like that's great, right? But a big part of it is actually tending to your thoughts. Because how many of you guys know you can like go on a vacation and come back just as stressed? Or more. Because typically it's not just the workload that makes you tired, it's what you believe about the workload. It's what you believe about yourself and what you think is on the line at your job. It's not just your job. It's not just parenting, as hard as it is. It's what you believe is at stake in your parenting, what's on you, what's on God. And so as a pastor, I've seen a lot of people in the present fight a war that ended 30 years ago in their family of origin. Or a moment that's no longer here, but they're living in it like it is. Again, there's different people, but kind of like, oh no, they're kind of shooting the wrong people. But at the end of the day, it's their thoughts. And here's the other thing, is it isolates us from getting the help we need. One author puts it this way: our life is always moving in the direction of our strongest thoughts. Our life is always moving in the direction of our strongest thoughts. Now, I don't know what thoughts you have swirling around in your mind, but they impact your life in significant ways. When you think thoughts like, I can't trust people, no one will ever love the real me, I'll never succeed, I'll always be broke, I'm never gonna have a good marriage, God doesn't hear my prayers because God doesn't care about me, I'm never gonna make a difference, I'm never going to amount to anything, I'll always be a victim, I'll never actually become like Jesus. Guys, you can't think like that and not have it shape you. Does that make sense? And for the purposes of today, what I want to say is you cannot be a healthy, spiritually mature disciple of Jesus while maintaining an unhealthy thought life. You cannot be a healthy, spiritually mature disciple of Jesus while maintaining an unhealthy thought life. In other words, you'll never be healthier than your thought life. Isn't that crazy? Like, I don't care how much you focus in on your emotions, if your thoughts are off, your emotions aren't gonna get better in and of themselves. I don't care how much you try to change your practices and you wanna practice the way of Jesus, or do spiritual disciplines, or have some healthy rhythms in your life, like Sabbath or date nights or whatever. Until we get at these thoughts, it can be so hard to break out and grow into maturity. So I have 3 points today I want to talk about tied to this. One is really long, 2 are short, okay? So if you're like, oh my gosh, 3, you're like, that was the intro. Just relax, okay? It's only gonna be about 75 more minutes, okay? Number 1, we need to understand the importance of our thoughts. Number 2, we need to engage our thoughts actively. And number 3, we need to bring our thoughts to Jesus and his people. We need to understand the importance of our thoughts. In Proverbs, it says, as a man thinketh, so he is. As a man thinketh, so he is. And that's the idea of what we think about shaping us is all over Scripture. I'm going to look at one passage today, but you can do a lot on this. Romans 12 talks about renewing your mind. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 3 through 4, the Apostle Paul writes, for although we live in the flesh, we do not wage war according to the flesh, since the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but are powerful through God for the demolition of strongholds. Now, the Greek word that's translated as powers there, it's the word dunamis. If you're an etymology nerd, you just love where words come from. It's where we get the word dynamite. It means powerful, explosive. But what's the power for? And Paul says it's to demolish or destroy strongholds. And I don't have time to nerd out on this with you for the sake of time. But I will say that a stronghold was the safest place in an ancient kingdom. It was the center. It was, Tom and I, we were in India few months ago, and we went to a ancient Muslim dynasty castle. It was a Mughal castle where we get the word mogul. They were ballin', like when you get, right? You get it named after you. And they had multiple walls in between where the people would have traded goods, to the royal courts, to where the king lived, to the castle, to the stronghold. There was a impenetrable kind of tower that to get in would be really tricky. Kind of you got to go up the stairwell, and essentially you can fight off one person at a time. You got a few, dudes, assassins with you, Secret Service cats, and it makes you safer. You kind of hold out until people show up. And so the idea is there's a war raging inside all of our minds, and that war is with the world, the flesh, and the devil. That's what church history calls them, the world. The ideas that are outside of here that are opposed to God, cultural ideas that are opposed to God. There's the flesh, ideas in you that are opposed to God. And then there's the enemy of your soul, Satan, who loves to tell you all kinds of things that aren't true, that ruin our lives. He's called a liar by Jesus. And here's why it's important, because verse 5 says, we need to take these thoughts captive. So verse 5 says, and every proud thing that is raised up against the knowledge of God, and we take every thought captive to obey Christ. So it's not just to feel better, right? Or to feel more refreshed or to feel less stressed out. That will be a byproduct, I believe, of doing this. But ultimately, what we think, Paul says, impacts our ability to obey Jesus. Does that make sense? And so this is a critical idea. This is a really big deal. What we think impacts how we live. What we think impacts how we behave. So what we think is super important. The late Dallas Willard, a philosophy professor at USC, a phenomenal Christian thinker on discipleship and transformation, he says this. He says, the ultimate freedom we have as human beings is, how would you fill that in? No. That was a good Christian guess. What do you guys think, if you were to ask just people in general, what's the ultimate freedom we have as human beings? To what? To choose. What else? Anything else? Huh? To do what you want. Yeah. What else? To think. Dallas Willard says it's the power to select what our minds dwell upon. So deeper than what you feel or what you do, and I think we all have to agree that, it's to feel what I want to feel or do what I want to do. I think our culture would say that pretty loudly. You have thoughts that inform why you want to do what you want to do. You have thoughts that impact how you feel at any given moment about God, yourself, or others. So now Scripture presents a strong link between what we think about and what we feel and who we become, but that link is backed up by scientific research, which is really interesting. Scientists, therapists, and researchers are finding out what the ancient writers of Scriptures have always seen, that there's an inseparable link between what we think, how we feel, and how we live. Clinical psychologist and professor of psychology at St. Mary's College, Catherine Pittman, writes, the circuits of your brain aren't determined completely by genetics. They're also shaped by your experiences and the way you think and behave. You can remodel your brain to respond differently no matter what your age. There are limits, but there's also a surprising level of flexibility and potential to change in your brain. And family, that's incredible news, right? That means we can change our mind, and Paul just told us we have dynamite level power to go about doing that. It means we can truly be intentional with honoring God with our mind because we're not simply victims to our genetic wiring. Counselor Deborah Folletta adds this. She says, the earliest psychologists believe that negative feelings led to negative thoughts. But over the years, psychologists have determined that it's actually the other way around. What we think actually triggers how we feel, which then impacts how we behave. But most people go about their day mindless to how their thoughts are actually impacting them and unaware that they have the power to change those thoughts. Counselors and psychologists call the concept of taking ownership of your thoughts cognitive behavioral therapy. But it was essentially created by the best counselor around, God, in Scripture. We see the principle of the power of changing your thoughts referred to as renewing your mind. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. It's Romans 12:2. She closes, whether we call it cognitive behavioral therapy or the renewing of our mind, the bottom line is this. Thought change leads to life change. Thought change leads to life change. There's actually a slide. This is, if you've ever heard of cognitive behavioral therapy, it's one of the main ways therapists treat a ton of different things. I don't have time to get super into it, but by and large, there's stuff I might disagree with how it's applied or whatever that might not line up with the Bible, but a lot of it does line up with Scripture in a pretty concrete way. And the idea is that your thoughts impact your feelings, which impact your behavior, which impacts your life situation. Now, here's what I'll say. Again, I work closely with quite a few therapists and counselors, and a lot of times we'll partner. As a pastor, I'll partner with a therapist with the person's permission who's in our church, who's asking for help, to go, hey, how can we best set up a plan to help someone who's going through a thing? And oftentimes, it's determining when someone needs counseling. And typically, I'll give you the most two common times when people think they need counseling in my experience. One is there's a situation in life that feels too big for them to handle. Okay? So there's an unexpected death of a family member. There's the loss of a business. There's a betrayal in a marriage. There's a child who's sick, like really sick. And there's a circumstance that just feels outside of your ability to navigate. You feel like you need wisdom. Again, my favorite definition of grace in the Bible is just help. That's what Gary Bashir at Westminster Seminary says. It's help outside of you. That's what the pardon is of Jesus, but also the power of the Holy Spirit. It's grace outside of you. And it's also God using people in your life outside of you to give you what you don't have inside of yourself, because no one has the resources internally. No matter what we tell ourselves or our culture says, the answers aren't inside of you. And so the idea is that a situation comes. The other one is behavior. So someone goes, they hit a point, they go, man, I've got an addiction, right? I wake up and realize I'm addicted to shopping or gambling or pornography or we're at a point in our marriage where wild conflicts are happening and it is not healthy, it's not good. And we realize again, like I need help changing. Could be disordered eating. It's like, man, there's something that just feels like I can't stop this and I'm worried about myself and I need help. By the way, those are great reasons to get counseling. But here's the thing that you'll find out if you go to a good counselor. They're not going to spend a lot of time trying to change your situation, most of the time. In scenarios where there's abuse or something, absolutely, getting you to safety. But a lot of our stuff isn't like that. It's something that happened before in the past. Does that make sense? Or it's something that we're out of control that we have to figure out how to navigate. The other thing is that you'll start to see that your behavior is connected to these other things. So really good counselors, usually what they do, again, really good counselors, by the way, should make you more resilient, not more fragile. You might feel weaker short-term, long-term. You should be stabilized and strong and able to live life increasingly on your own 2 feet, given some tools and stuff with other people. But it shouldn't be this long-term, like you're completely dependent on them for the rest of your life. Like I just want to, people that are nervous or whatever about therapy, that's what it shouldn't be. And there's a lot of great counselors that want to see you be resilient and free. Now, here's the thing. What most people don't go, hey, I want to go to counseling. They don't go, I got to get my thoughts in order. Very few people. Again, we'll talk about some exceptions, things like PTSD and OCD with intrusive thoughts. Most of the time, you're like, it's the behavior or the circumstance, right? This is hard right now, right? Maybe it's emotions, like I'm just feeling really sad or really anxious and realizing I might need some help. But rarely we go, man, my thoughts just they got to improve, right? But here's the thing, man, what we believe impacts, right, how we live. It impacts what we feel, and then it impacts how we live. And again, you've probably experienced this in your life, moments where you had a thought that wasn't true, and you got really going on it, right? I feel like back in the day, every episode of I Love Lucy was some version of that. It was like they had a thought, they were doing something, at the end they're like, whoa, I thought you were cheating on me. You were planning a party at the Copacabana. What? Now, again, sometimes it's funny. A lot of times it's not funny, right? Because sometimes we get really hurt. Churches are divided all the time over this. We don't check out the things that we're thinking. I remember I threw a birthday party year 2 of our church, and it was a really fun birthday party. It was a 90s themed birthday party. It was a lot of Ninja Turtle stuff going on, 90s rapper t-shirts. A girl rollerbladed in with a JanSport backpack. It was a vibe and a half. It was a lot of fun. And it was kind of the golden age of social media before we knew it was killing us. And people were posting pictures. And the next day, a friend of mine, one of the elders at our church now, Royce, he reached out to me, and he wasn't an elder yet, but he was a guy I trusted. I was really enjoying getting to know in our community, and a pretty good friend of mine. He lived a couple blocks away, and he texted me, and I was actually on stage. We're getting ready to plant the South Bay Church plant, and we did our first informational meeting, and I got a text, and he said, "Hey man, I don't want you to take this the wrong way, but I'm just confused, why I didn't get invited to your birthday." And again, no offense to the people there. I just saw some of the people that were there, and I feel like I'm closer to you than them, but I don't want to make assumptions. Now, in that moment, right, he had the courage to reach out, right? So there was a thought. He felt sad about it and confused. And then again, his behavior, he did a mature route of asking. But when he asked, I got to go, "Oh my gosh, man." I was like, "I did invite you." I was sending out a text. And what I realized, what had happened is my friend Royce, he was really resistant to getting an iPhone. And so what you need to know about Royce is he was a green bubble man. Now, you might be a green bubble person. I think there's room for all of us at the foot of the cross. But here's what I'll say about green bubble. And again, there's a lot, man, it's an election year. There's the blue and red divide. There's socioeconomic, one of the big divides in America is the blue-green bubble divide. And I got to tell you, they've ruined a lot of text message threads I've been on over the years where they don't get the messages, or they even keep other people from getting the messages. You guys have been here. I don't need to spend too much time on this, but I gotta say, this is a blue-green. And then he goes, "Oh my gosh, Allison did get it. We didn't realize." And we got to talk through. Now, here's what I want you to catch. Very easily, he could have taken that, and you've seen this. You probably had this in your gospel community before, or in your family of origin, right? Aunt Sally's not invited to the party. Maybe on purpose, maybe not on purpose. She makes an assumption, right? She has a thought. She's mad. Then she starts talking to other people. Can you believe it? No one appreciates it, me anymore, right? And again, Royce could have done that. He'd be like, "Man, should pastors even have birthday parties? People can get their feelings hurt, man. It's not fair. Making the sheep feel left out." He could have gone, "Man, maybe Andy's a narcissist, and it was a power move. He wanted me to feel it. He wanted me to see that I wasn't there. And see guys that, I wasn't close to, who were there." It's low-key outreach, He could have, just started gossiping in general. Man, Andy's he's really exclusive, he's mean. Do you see where this could have gone really quickly? Now again, he could have been right on that. He wasn't, if you thought, but again, until you check it out, you don't know. You kind of roll with it. And I've seen people get down the road with a narrative about someone, and they've shared it with quite a few people. They've got quite a story to tell. And there's some times where stories absolutely need to be told. Someone did something that's horrific or wrong or abusive or mean or whatever it is. They need to, it's serious, it needs to happen. I'm gonna bring light to darkness. But there's other times where we're talking, and I'm like, "So what did they do how do you know?" I just know they were full of pride. I go, "Whoa, how do you know?" Trust me, I know, right? And I've seen them talk, and there's a breakthrough. I was sitting with someone recently, and they were sure, it's not someone in this church or anyone that you know, they were sure they had a breakdown with one of their siblings, and they hadn't talked in over a year. And she said, this sibling's never apologized to me once in my entire life. And we had a rough interaction, and I've kind of cut them out. And now I don't know, I said some wild stuff to them at the time, and I want to own that I said wild stuff. But I also want to own this wasn't healthy, so I feel stuck. And I said, "Hey, well, you could send a text apology." And she said, "I can't even imagine doing that." I said, "Well, you can do it with me here. There's no pressure, but if you want to do that, I think it'd be a good way to just, She's like, "Okay, I probably should do it because I'd probably struggle to do it on my own." And she sent the text and just said, "Hey, I'd love to meet up and talk. But, I'm regretting where we are." And I told her, "Hey, you're not gonna have to it doesn't mean that everything that she's done to you in the past is okay. It's just saying what I did in that specific moment wasn't cool, and let's talk about our relationship." And she got a text back, and she couldn't look at her phone. She was shaking. And she said, "I know it's going to be bad." And I said, okay, well, I said, maybe not, and I just said, can I read it? Would you be okay if I read it first? And she said, "Yeah, that'd probably be good." And I got to just say, I read it, and the first line just said, "Hey," her sister's name, "I've thought about you so much the last 9 months, and I wanted to apologize too, but I've been afraid." And so I just got to say, "Hey, it's good." I teared up to say, "Hey, it's good." And she said, I'm sorry also. She said she'd never heard an apology in her whole life. And she said, Andy, when I sent the text, when I saw her name, I thought I was just going to say, F you. But what I want you to catch is how intense is that, and how much damage does those thoughts, when we assume we know people, even people that have hurt us in the past, we make assumptions about them in the future, and it really hurts the relationships. It means people can't grow and change. And so what I want you to catch is what we think impacts not just us, but our relationships. It's the unity of the church. It's our ability to love people who don't know Jesus yet. It impacts our mental health and our burnout. There's a guy named Steve Cuss, he does leadership anxiety stuff. He says, exhaustion and burnout have more to do with anxious thoughts about the workload than the workload itself. He says a lot of leaders love a big workload. That's why they're leaders. They love getting stuff done, projects, moving, grooving, getting stuff done. It's not the workload. It's what they think their identity's on the line all the time, or they think everyone's well-being is up to them. That's when burnout happens. Also, another thing that's really important, we'll bail on this in a second, but just like we're all going to face hard situations. You can bail on it now, the slide. We're all going to face hard situations. We are going to suffer. Jesus said, in this world, you will have trouble. We're going to experience suffering and pain. But here's what I want you to catch. What you think about your suffering and pain is almost as important as what's happened to you. And there's a ton of trauma research and stuff. Again, it's kind of trauma's heyday, and some of that's good. But here's the thing about trauma. Trauma's not just what happened, it's how you interpret what happened, the message you made of it, and how it impacts your ability to move forward. Does that make sense? Either with resilience or avoidance, fear, anxiety, all that stuff. Now again, there's a bodily component to that, but the bodily component's connected to messages in your nervous system that you have, the beliefs you have. This reminds me of that thing that was really hard, and here's what I believe about that. And so I'm shutting down, I'm afraid. This feels like the past. So what you think about suffering, what you think about the suffering you're facing, what you believe about yourself, about God, in the midst of and before suffering, thoughts, interpretations, expectations, before and after painful experiences shape us about as much as the experiences themselves. This is why, by the way, you've probably seen this. It's not just what happens to us, it's how we interpret that shapes our lives, right? This is why two people can suffer in essentially the same way, and one can come out with a more vibrant trust in Jesus. They're not in denial, they're not pretending they're not hurt, they're not pretending trauma wasn't trauma. Like they're like, I was hurt and it was hard, but I can still live in the reality that Jesus is good, as hard as that is to believe sometimes. I'm not bitter at people. And other people, it's all anger, bitterness. Does that make sense? By the way, I'm not even blaming them for the thoughts they had. I'm just saying the thoughts made that worse. It made the pain worse. Again, it's not just your parents divorcing that impacts you when you're a kid. It's compounded infinitely when you believe the divorce was your fault because no one told your little brain that that's what was happening. It's not your parents screaming at you. It's not only your parents screaming at you that impacted you. It's the belief that when they lost their temper, it was your fault because they didn't apologize and explain that that was on them, not on you. And that's a kid that they're going to grow up with a ton of shame and self-doubt. It's not just the betrayal of a close friend or a romantic partner that shatters our ability to move forward. It's the belief that no one is ever trustworthy in the future that'll limit our life. It's not just spiritual abuse that wounds the person who's been spiritually abused. It's not just there's the pain of what happened. There's also I don't want to be anywhere near a church ever again. In the Bible, which makes total sense, by the way. But at the same time, the Bible says this is where we encounter Jesus. And so it's cutting you off from help. And so what we think about what we've experienced matters a lot. And so we need to see the importance of our thoughts. Number two, we need to engage our thoughts. This is really important. We need to engage our thoughts. Paul says we need to take thoughts captive. And the idea here is like putting a thought in a cage and considering it from multiple directions. Again, the idea is like capturing a lion. But here's the thing, you can't capture a lion if you don't know what a lion is. We need to engage our thoughts. Imagine like we're going to go on a safari. We're going to see some lions. Do you know where they are? I actually don't know what they look like. We're going to track them, right? You're really tricky. In the same way, it's like, okay, what I'm thinking is impacting me in significant ways. But what if I don't know what I'm thinking? Again, we often don't engage our thoughts. By the way, I'm not going to be able to do enough today in this sermon. I just want to say, if you want to read a book I highly recommend, there's a book called A Still and Quiet Mind by Esther Smith, E-S-T-H-E-R Smith. And she works through, she has about 10 chapters on different types of unwanted thoughts or thoughts you wrestle with. And she is she's a licensed trauma therapist. She also is a biblical counselor, and she integrates rich gospel theology with like embodied trauma-informed care. So it's really, really cool. I can't inform it enough. Again, biblically rich, trauma-sensitive, clinically informed. She points out that we often fail to engage our thoughts well for one of two reasons. She says either we over-identify with our thoughts, which means we obsess about them, which means we're so in them we can't take a step back and see them because we're in them. We almost think our thoughts are us, which they're not always. Or number two, we avoid them and we're unaware of how they're impacting us. They're in the background on loop, kind of impacting us and we aren't aware. I remember about a year ago, I sat with a guy at a coffee shop. And the guy said to me, he's like, we're having a decent pastoral meeting. I maybe met with him one time before that. Don't know him very well. He's been in our church for a while. He's more connected to our other pastor who couldn't meet. And so I met up with him and he just said, hey man, I finally got that promotion. And I just felt so happy for him. And I felt so grateful that he finally got that promotion. And I felt so moved. And I even began to tear up. And the interesting thing is I didn't even know he was trying to get a promotion. I didn't even know where this guy worked. The thing is Adele was playing overhead. And my body felt real emotional and grateful. Does that make sense? I've been in spaces where I've sat with people through intense suffering as a pastor, then moved emotionally. This just wasn't one of those things. It was like good news, and I didn't even know it was like something he was working through. And so here's the idea. Our thoughts are like that. They have like a strong reaction. You're like, dude, what was that? Well, you're probably thinking about something before that happened. Does that make sense? And so what we want to do is slow down and pay attention to our thoughts. Some people call this metacognition. You're thinking about thinking. Does that make sense? And what am I thinking and how is it impacting me? One of the ways to do that, by the way, is to look at what you're feeling. Because sometimes our feelings flow from our thoughts. So most of the time, as a general rule. And so if that's happening, go, hey, I'm really angry, just to even slow down long enough to go, hey, why am I angry, right? And it might be, because this person did this thing, but why is that bothering me like it is? What's the hardest for me about that? Well, usually you'll end up with, because I believe blank, about them, about me, and that really gets you. So for us to consider our thoughts, it's probably good to think about different types of thoughts. I have a slide with different types of thoughts. Not that one, sorry. Here it is. So we got types of thoughts. We've got good and beautiful thoughts. We've got inaccurate thoughts. We've got anxiously idolatrous thoughts. We've got immoral thoughts. We've got inherited thoughts. We've got intrusive thoughts. I have a mentor who in seminary took a class on sermon alliteration. And what you need to know is I didn't take that class. I just have a natural gift. So number one, good and beautiful thoughts. These things are good and true, right? The Bible says set your mind on things above. To think about what is holy and pure and lovely, right? This is when you're seeing life as it actually is in God's good care in his kingdom. You see yourself as a son or a daughter who struggles with sin, who has suffered, but who ultimately has a hope and a future, and has a father who will provide for them one way or another in this life. Those are good and beautiful thoughts that'll set your heart free. But then number two, there's inaccurate thoughts. Inaccurate thoughts. Clinicians and therapists will often talk about something called cognitive distortions or thinking traps. They're distorted or inaccurate ways of thinking, okay? And so essentially it's like, for example, if you say something like, you always do this or you never do this, usually that's not true, right? No one ever always does anything, except for my son always asking for dessert after every meal. Now the Bible has a fancy name for cognitive distortions. It calls them lies. Now, we all have some version of this, but here's the thing. These cognitive distortions, they're on repeat in our brain, and we're not even aware of it, and again, they get us stuck. So it's might be a little boring. My counselor actually has a list of these. You can find these online, has a list of these distortions. And I want to read through a couple of them, the descriptions, okay? So, and as I read them, by the way, think, do I do this, okay? Don't think, oh man, that guy's reading from a page. This is so boring. Think, this is a chance for me to learn about myself and some of my thought processes. So the first one's called black and white thinking or all or nothing thinking. She writes, people who struggle with this cognitive distortion have a tendency to see things in extremes rather than having a balanced perspective. They look at things as either all black or white, good or bad, helpful or unhelpful. Things are either amazing or they're terrible. You ever experienced this in your life or the life of someone else? If you mess up, you're a failure. If you do well, you're incredible. This extreme way of thinking often leads to intense emotions and impulsive reactions. Healthy people learn to think and process with balance. So here's what you need to know is, could set you free a little bit. A correct view of yourself biblically is that you have multiple identities at the same time. There's a really helpful book on this too called Saint, Sinner, Suffer by a guy named Michael Emlet. And the idea is that every Christian is simultaneously a saint, things that are true about them in Christ. They are a sufferer, they have been wounded or hurt, and it's not their fault. And then there is sin for which they have to take responsibility for. Does that make sense? And so the reality is that every person you've ever met, but every Christian you've ever met is simultaneously indwelt by the Holy Spirit and has a fallen body, who lives in a fallen world, who had a fallen family that impacts how they show up, both in terms of their sin and their suffering. Does that make sense? And one day we're gonna be all saint, baby. I can't wait, right? All saints. We're gonna be that. But right now, here's the thing. Every person you've ever met is those things. That means we're all in process. And that means that we're all made in the image of God. If you're in Jesus, you're being renewed by the Holy Spirit. All of us are beautiful, baby. That's what that means. There's beauty and wonder to you. The problem is it's just underneath the marring of the fall. And becoming like Jesus, sanctification, it's not about being like a hardcore rule follower. It's about you'll follow rules forever, learning to live how he intended you to live. But here's the thing. It has to do with removing the marring, so that increasingly you look like the beautiful person Jesus created you to be in the first place, right? I don't know if you ever, underneath fat, it's all muscle, right? Like all of us have a bunch of muscle underneath fat. All of us have sainthood and beauty and dignity and worth and gifting. There's goodness to you. Impacted by the fall, impacted by sin, yes. This isn't like an Oprah. You're amazing just as you are. You're not. But you are amazing. And that's why sin's so heartbreaking, is it makes you less than who you should be. This also means that other people aren't all bad or all good. Your spouse, your kids. Some of us, we really want to get rid of cognitive dissonance. We want to get rid of the confusion of people, and you just can't, because sin runs through everyone and beauty runs through everyone because they're all made in the image of God. One of the weirdest things in the world when they got one of Saddam Hussein's palaces is there was a ton of pictures with him and his grandkids, and he looked to be a good grandfather. He looked like he was having fun. Okay? Now, I'm not here to do a huge pro-Saddam Hussein thing. But my point is as humans, we can't even see even a glimpse of beauty. Even Saddam Hussein had a glimpse of beauty in him. I don't care who you're going to vote for in this election. I really don't. But probably the other side that you really don't like, that guy too, made in the image of Jesus. Made in the image of God. Right? May not be filled with the Holy Spirit, might not be working on removing their mar. I don't think either of them are removing the marring of sin in their life if you hear them talk. But there's someone, but again, we dehumanize political opponents in this country, which is utterly unchristian. No one's all bad or all good. Leaders, right? That was a big movement. Every other podcast for a while was like, man, leaders have done incredible damage. They have done incredible damage. They're also humans with stories. And there's more accountability because they have more power, so they can impact more people. And that needs to be taken incredibly seriously. But that means that there's abusive, predatory stuff that is evil, where guys should go to jail, be removed from ministry for life. It's done. And then there's a lot of stuff where people have blind spots and they say the wrong thing. Does that make sense? And we have a lot of people who go, oh, I know what they meant, right? And so again, huge churches, right? Anytime I've engaged with I engaged with someone at my church, and they're like a month in, they're like, this is the best church of all time. The community is loving. The preaching is long, but it's rich, right? We take communion every week, and it feels special, and we serve, and all that. And I go, man, if you think this is the best church ever, this will be the worst church ever in 6 months to 3 years. Why? Because you're prone to black and white, all or nothing thinking. So Christian maturity, last thing I'm gonna say about this, Christian maturity is not living in denial and pretending that the bad isn't bad. Does that make sense? But it's also not pretending that the good isn't good. It's learning to live in the tension that God lives in, by the way, of seeing the good and the bad in us and in the world around us. Does that make sense? This will set us free from a lot of problems in our lives and in the church. Part of why abusive leaders get going, I mentioned earlier, is because we go, they do good stuff, the bad stuff can't be that bad. It's like, no, the bad stuff's the worst. God isn't like, oh, the ends justify the means. People got saved, so I don't care about abuse. Does that make sense? On the flip side, like with other scenarios, you'd see moments where people can't see the good in someone because they have done something really wrong, or they've made a mistake, or they've even sinned. Does that mean we can dehumanize? So just to say to you, to start with yourself, you really can love the person Jesus made. This isn't like hippie. It's like you can have love towards the person made in God's image, who has so much value and worth. You're wonderfully made. But also, so again, if you thought that way about yourself, I promise you, you're like, hey, I am a delighted in, beloved child of God who is wrestling with an addiction, who is wrestling with my anger issues, who is wrestling with how I impact people. Does that make sense? Versus, I'm just this addict, or I'm this person who's awful in relationships, or I'll always be. Another one is, another distortion is called emotional reasoning. And this distortion happens when we believe, again, this would be inaccurate thinking, when we believe that what you feel must be true automatically. So if you feel that, again, if you feel like you know what someone's intention was, that means it is. If you feel, and again, we've got such a lack of objective truth in our society. We do this all the time, by the way. Instagram is all emotional reasoning, right? Most of the topics people post about that are huge, right? Israel, Palestine, immigration, abortion. There's a whole host of issues I can think of. Most of what's on social media is a strong emotional reasoning. I just know this is how it should be and why, right? Most of the things would require 2.5-hour long-form discussions and books to even get a crack at an informed opinion, right? It's like, I saw this clip on the news, and right? It's emotional reasoning, because I feel that way, it's true. Again, it might be right, but it's just not more right because you feel it. Okay? Now again, I don't want to downplay your emotions. Your emotions matter. They're just telling you how you feel. They're not telling you what's necessarily real outside of you. And again, I see this all the time, man. I'll sit with someone and sit with like a married couple and getting into it really intensely, and one of the spouses is like, man, I just feel like they think I'm stupid and dumb and they want me to fail. And I go, whoa. And again, nothing's been said that would indicate that. I go, do they say that? They don't say that, but that's what they, and I go, oh, okay, what's or is it their, well, it's not, are they yelling? No, are they, and again, you get to it, it's like, I just feel this way, which is connected to a very different thing. Another one would be personalization. This distortion happens when we assume responsibility for things that don't belong to us, or we take things personally and make them about us. Now again, the most human thing in the world, it's probably the center part of us, the most human thing in the world is to look at a group picture and go, how do I look, right? Tom sent me a picture with 4 leaders in our family of churches, and I was like, that's one of my fattest pictures of all time. That angle, right? I've worked a lot, and this is what you got. He's like, it's my favorite one. I was like, cool. Your mustache is glistening, your hair looks great, salt and pepper. King, I don't know, just looked incredible. Danny Kimmel was in the picture with glowing skin, per usual. Anyways, back to this. It's also common when we walk in a room to go, how do I feel about the room? What are people thinking of me, right? If you're a woman here and you've obsessed, or a man even, and you've obsessed over what you're gonna wear to a wedding, because you thought they're going to see the bride, but seriously, right? They're not going to see you. Everyone wants to be seen and loved. At a wedding, if you're not the bride, you're loved, but you're not really seen, right? You personalize everything. If someone at church doesn't say hi to you, right, you make an assumption. I've had times where someone told me, a guy at church, I said hi, introduced myself to him, he went like this and walked away. I was like, whoa, I know that guy. He's really chill. I don't know if he knows. And then in talking to him, he's like, oh, I didn't even see that guy. I didn't know. See what I'm saying? We can go on and on and on. Remember, during 2020, 2021, 2020 was like, gosh, I just don't even want to think about it. But 2021, I just remember everything was super political. And there was a guy in our church who wanted us to be more political in one direction. And we kind of had some tough moments. Because as a church, we're not going to go super hardcore into this. And he started, I noticed he started getting up halfway through the sermon and going to the back. And I was like, oh man, it's because we're not, dude, this political thing, he probably can't sit under my preaching, he doesn't respect me. And so after a few weeks of this, I just approached him. And I get nervous. I was like, hey man, are you struggling to sit through the gathering because we've had some disagreements on this? Do you respect me? He's like, oh man, no, I have a small bladder, man. I have to go pee often. Here's the thing, that was always true of him. He's like, I was just noticing it because of the politics. It wasn't the politics, it was the pee. So that's personalization. I can send you guys some more of these if you're interested for a time standpoint. I'm just going to try to get going here. The third type of thought we want to think through is anxiously idolatrous thoughts. Anxiously idolatrous thoughts. By the way, the thoughts I just talked about before this, they weren't really inherently sinful. They're just a way of seeing things that gets you stuck. Does that make sense? This is a little bit more, we have a little more responsibility for having these thoughts, these specific ones. So anxiously idolatrous thoughts. And again, we talked about this before. I've preached here before on this. There's three types of anxiety. When you think about this idea at this point in human history, there are anxiety disorders. There is acute anxiety and there's a chronic anxiety. Anxiety disorders are things like OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, which by the way, I have. It's intense sometimes. PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, generalized anxiety disorder. These are all, this stuff's connected to your brain, potentially previous trauma, not a choice you're making to think these thoughts. And just to help you if you're not sure. Now again, here's the other thing. We are the most overdiagnosed generation ever. I don't have time to talk about that. 40% of Americans had an anxiety disorder recently. 40% of Gen Z kids, had it. So again, I don't have time to get too into that, but I do want to help us think about being able to parse between the two. So I'll just read a quote to help with that, if you think you may have that. Harvard Medical School says this: how would you know if you have crossed over into the zone of a full-blown anxiety disorder? It says anxiety disorders are characterized by severe, persistent worry that is excessive for the situation and extreme avoidance of provoking situations. These symptoms cause distress, impair daily functioning, and occur for a significant period. For instance, a person who needs to stay home from work several days in a row due to panic attacks may be suffering from an anxiety disorder. Again, people that can't ever get on an airplane, things like, again, it's really disrupting your life. So again, we have these three types. So the first one, we have that slide. Anxiety disorders would be acute and chronic. Again, perceived threat rarely resolves without an intervention. Okay. The second kind is acute. Is called acute anxiety. Do we have that? Or no. If you don't, it's okay. Acute anxiety is a gift from God, and it keeps you safe. So it's short-lived, and it's connected to a real threat. So when I was hiking recently, we were walking, and I saw a snake, and I just jumped back. Okay. That's me. Acute anxiety is there, and it's a gift from God. When you almost crash into someone and you hit your brakes, you feel it in your body, you're nervous. Once you realize you didn't hit anyone, you get back, you start to breathe easier, the anxiety goes away. The last one's called chronic anxiety. And chronic anxiety is the type of anxiety Jesus is talking about on the Sermon on the Mount when he says not to worry. Again, he's not talking about good anxiety that keeps us safe, or an anxiety order, which is often connected to your brain's functioning. He's talking about anxiety that assumes we are alone in the world and that we need to be our own gods. Does that make sense? This is the anxiety that's worried about things like, what if I, never prove my parents wrong? What if I die poor and alone? What if I'm not perfect? Now, what you need to know, what if my finances don't work out long term, even though I'm doing the best that I can? How are my kids going to turn out in ways that aren't necessarily healthy? What you need to know about chronic anxiety, again, it's the kind that Jesus talks about in terms of worry. And it's an unworry that's rooted in unbelief, a belief that you're all alone in the world. Now, I just mentioned earlier, Generation Z kids in America are on average, on paper, some of the most privileged, well-resourced kids in the world. And they're also some of the saddest, most anxious, depressed kids who've ever lived. By the way, if you're here and you're Gen Z, it's not necessarily your fault. It's not your fault at all. But one major contributing factor to that is that for a lot of those in Gen Z, they're actually growing up in a world without objective truth as the norm. Where actually often there isn't anyone bigger than them that can tell them that what they want is right or is wrong. Again, being raised in an environment where you have to create your own world, where again, at a basic level, we're kind of functioning like atheists. There's no God. It also feels like almost every Disney movie these days communicates parents are stupid, right? They just don't get it. Now, parents can do stupid things, but they've got a lot of wisdom you need, right? And they might even say, hey, don't do what I did. I'll tell you some stupid things I did so you can learn. So it's like, hey, God, it's not God, it's not parents. Again, even unhealthy expressions of gentle parenting where people aren't told what is right or wrong, but encouraged to pick what they want to do at the age of 2. Get great with a teenager, maybe not great with the 2-year-olds. People are pumping that right now. Again, choose your own values, choose your own morality, choose your own gender, right? That's too much choice. And it puts you in a position of being like a god. And it communicates you're alone in this world and you need to figure out life all by yourself. Now, at its core, this isn't just a Generation Z thing. Ever since the fall of humans, we all implicitly believe that we need to take care of ourselves and take matters into our own hands. We forget who we are and whose we are. Adam and Eve wanted to be like God. So do we in the worst ways. Not like God in terms of character, like being loving. Like we want to be like God, like we want to be sovereign. But the reality is that God's in charge, so we don't have to be. And this is the type of thing that sets us free. Now, I don't have time to use that triangle thing earlier, but the idea is that I was going to get into is that a lot of times our anxiety, this kind of anxiety, it's connected to thinking we have to control people, or we have to control what other people think of us, or we have to control like world events that are outside of our control. And all three of those are outside of your control, right? Controlling what other people think of you. It's been said once, a lot of people don't feel defined by what they think of themselves, and they don't feel defined by what other people think of them, but actually they feel defined by what they think other people think of them. Isn't that crazy? And for a lot of us, that's where we can live, right? We're not in control. We can't control people. We control people, it gets weird quick. If we're able to do it, it's not good. And if we're not able to do it, we're stressed out. But if we go, actually, I'm not supposed to do that in the first place. I learned to trust God with people. The fourth kind of thoughts, immoral thoughts. This would be run-of-the-mill temptation, a thought where you desire something that is sinful, right? Whether it be a lustful thought or a greedy thought or an angry thought. Ruminating on someone else's demise, someone that wronged you. And these are thoughts that you're nursing, right? So it's like an anger fantasy. It's not just I got angry. Number 5 are inherited thoughts. Don't have time to get into these. All I'll say is these are thoughts kind of handed down to you intentionally or unintentionally by your family of origin. These would be things like, I need to prove so-and-so right. I need to prove so-and-so wrong. I will always be kind of rejected and wanted, unseen. I'll never be loved, accepted, valued. And then the last big kind of thoughts, intrusive thoughts. And these would be thoughts, they can be confused with immoral or sinful thoughts because they're often linked to thinking about something that's sexually sinful or violent. At the end of the day, these are thoughts you don't want. You're disturbed by them yourself. You're not like, this is cool. You're like, why would I think that? And again, intrusive thoughts can be connected to things like PTSD or OCD, which I don't have time to talk about today, but if you're wrestling with that, we just want to say we would love to get you connected to someone who can help you. Again, our family of churches have a care and counseling ministry led by a clinical psychologist, informed by the gospel, who would love to help you. Which leads to where I want to close here, and it's this. One of the things that we need to do with our thoughts in terms of engaging them is to slow down and ask ourselves questions about them. Things like, is this true? Is this helpful? Is this really what I believe about God, myself, or others? And here's the thing I want to say. Again, we need to bring our thoughts to Jesus and his people. We need the help of others to take thoughts captive sometimes. I think for whatever reason, I think oftentimes we think of taking thoughts captive as like an individual exercise. Because it's internal, it's inside your mind. But really, can you imagine capturing a lion by yourself? Like, pretty cool story, but probably gonna die. But when you bring other people in with you to help you, right? So a counselor, and instead of asking her friends, how do you feel these days? She just goes, how are you thinking these days? Like, what's on your mind? Which is really, really helpful. And so here's where I'm genuinely gonna close. I'm sorry, guys. Here's the reality. Some of the cognitive distortions or untrue thoughts I mentioned above are on repeat, and we're unaware of them, and they impact us. And so when that happens, again, we want to learn to bring them out in community. So sometimes they're idolatrous or immoral thoughts. We need to bring them in community. James 5:16, confess them, receive prayer, and next steps. Also, we read Philippians 4:6-8, and I'll close with these verses. Paul says, don't worry about anything, but in everything, through prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. Here's the thing you need to know. Jesus understands you. He's safe. He can help you process through your thoughts. He can remind you that he is in control so you don't have to be. But you have to be honest about wherever you're at. Then verse 8 says, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any moral excellence, and if there is anything praiseworthy, dwell on these things. But what I want you to catch again is, that's brothers and sisters. Together, we want to do that. You need the help of a brother or sister. We need people to help us think differently at times. Again, I think counseling is great. We're going to be starting a counseling network. We're on board with counseling, but a lot of times people jump to counseling because they just need someone to talk to help them think through their thoughts. Does that make sense? And so there's definitely a space for licensed professionals and all that stuff, but there's also a space for people to just go, hey, let's talk how you're doing. And I love to encourage you and pray for you and remind you of the truth. We can't be too cool for that. So I'm going to pray to close this out. This was longer than I intended it to be. But I'm going to pray and I'll hand over to Tom. Father, I just thank you for truth. I thank you for the truth of Jesus that sets us free. Would you help this church, Restored Temecula, increasingly be able to bring what they're thinking to each other, to save people in this community, to leaders, and to you, to receive what they need, to experience a still and quiet mind, to experience a person who's ready to obey Jesus and isn't held back by their thoughts, who's able to love people and isn't held back by their thoughts. In Jesus' name, amen.
Okay, how's your bladder? Will you stand with me if you're able? We have about 7 minutes. And I really, if you're in the prayer team, I know we only have 7 minutes. Will you please come forward? I think there's still opportunity this morning. One of the things that I really appreciate about what Andy said this morning, he said a lot of really important things. I'm going to encourage you to even re-listen to this sermon this week. Do you realize what Andy's talking about? He's talking about Jesus being the Lord of your mind. Listen, our church can be known for a lot of things. It can be known for epic community. It can be known for a lot of gifted people. It can be known for all sorts of things. Listen, if it's not known for us yielding to the lordship of Jesus in every area of our life, we're just spinning our wheels, man. And so the question I want to leave you with this morning is, as the band's going to lead us and minister to us in here just a couple minutes, is there any area of your mind where Jesus isn't sitting on the throne? Is there any area of your thought life? I love that language, Andy. Any area of your thought life where Jesus isn't ruling and reigning? He's not determining what's true and real. But maybe there's other factors that are influencing those things. Because here's the thing, guys, we've been talking about this a lot. The kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God, the rule and the reign of God, what it looks like when God gets his way. The lordship of Jesus, he's the Lord, right? The lordship of Jesus, it's what actually leads to life. It's when we don't yield to the lordship of Jesus that it leads to the opposite of life. And that's what he desires for us. So go ahead and close your eyes for just a minute. Not to be overly spiritual, but just to kind of still our hearts, get in tune with who we are, the wholeness of who we are. And I just want you for a moment to think about the cross of Jesus. Because if we're honest, sometimes we don't want to yield to the lordship of Jesus in an area of our life, especially our thought life. And oftentimes it's because we don't really believe that he's trustworthy. Is he going to take care of me? Is he going to provide me what I need? All the anxieties that Andy talked about today. What if? So take a moment and just fix your eyes to the cross of Jesus. And doesn't it show you that he's trustworthy? Doesn't it show you that he loves you? Not the perfect, put together you, the needy you, even the worried and anxious you. Holy Spirit, with the limited remaining time we have left, I ask you to fill our hearts and our minds especially with the reality of the truth of who you are and what you've done and what that means for us. Amen. Trusted men and women are up here in the front that would love to pray for you. If there's any area in your thought life where you're like, man, I'm not yielding to the lordship of Jesus. Jesus wants freedom for you this morning. Come receive prayer. Band's going to lead us. We have like 5 minutes, guys. But God can do a lot in 5 minutes. So, and then I'll come up and close us in prayer in just a bit. But with the little bit of time you have, pursue eternal life. By eternal life, I don't mean what heaven when you go to when you die. I mean the here and now. The lordship of Jesus, the kingdom of God, ruling and reigning over your mind, over what you ascribe truth to. All right? Enjoy him for just a bit.
Your glory.
Jesus, we honor you. Jesus, we honor the lengths that you've gone to set us free. To set in many respects, our minds free from the tyranny of lies. And that's my prayer for our church, for every single man, woman, and child in this room. That the lies that infiltrate our minds would bow to the name of Jesus and flee and be replaced by the truth that you are good, that you're worthy, you're trustworthy. That means you're worth our trust, us placing our trust in you, us yielding truth to what you say is true. I pray that you'd grow us and strengthen us in this, and that the freedom we experience would spill out into our valley, into the lives of the people around us, and it would be a living demonstration of what the Lordship of Jesus produces: freedom, salvation, the kingdom. So show us the way, Holy Spirit. Lead us, Good Shepherd. Father us, we pray. In your name, Jesus, amen. All right, well, right at noon, guys, we're going to soft close. Okay, so if you have kids in kids ministry, will you go relieve the kids team? If you would like prayer this morning, still the counselors will be available for prayer. Love you very much. Enjoy your rest of your Sunday.